We live in interesting times. Today's featured stories. World leaders welcome Saudi prince at G20. Two Koreas start landmark journey for railway reconnection. Aussie kids skip school for mass climate protest. US, Mexico, Canada sign new USMCA trade deal. Syrian refugee stranded at Malaysia airport lands in Canada. Facebook knew about Russian activity in 2014. Plus, up-and-coming designers at Vancouver Fashion Week. This is Eagle News Canada bringing you stories from around the globe. I am Lou Aquino. World leaders, including a beaming Vladimir Putin, welcomed Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the G20 summit, showing he was no pariah less than 2 months after the murder of a dissident journalist by a Saudi hit team. In an image that quickly went viral online, the Russian leader and the prince both beamed and clasped each other's hands like long-lost friends. The embrace came amid reports that Russia and Saudi Arabia have reached a pact to cut oil production when the OPEC cartel meets on December 6 in Vienna to help shore up collapsing crude prices. The ambitious 33-year-old prince was also seen chatting with US President Donald Trump and his daughter Ivanka and shaking hands with French President Emmanuel Macron at the start of the two-day meeting of the world's top economies in Buenos Aires. The French presidency said that Macron spoke to the prince about the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and the Saudi-led offensive in Yemen, where millions are on the brink of starvation in what the United Nations calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Macron told Prince Mohammed that Europeans wanted international investigators to take part in the probe on Khashoggi's death and stressed the necessity of a political solution in Yemen, the Elysee Palace said. British Prime Minister Theresa May, speaking to Sky News before the summit, said she would press both on Yemen and Khashoggi, a Washington Post contributor who was killed when visiting the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. May said that the Saudi Arabians need to ensure that their investigation is a full investigation, that it's credible, that it's transparent, and that people can have the confidence in the outcome of it, and that those responsible are held to account. Khashoggi's killing has sparked widespread outrage, but Western powers have pledged to maintain close relations with Saudi Arabia, a top oil producer and buyer of U.S. weapons. Trump, in an exclamation point-heavy statement before the summit, said it did not matter whether Prince Mohammed knew about Khashoggi's death and that Saudi Arabia was important for business and for its hostility to Iran. The U.S. Senate nonetheless moved this week to end support for the Saudi-led war against rebels in Yemen amid outrage over attacks on civilian sites, including a school bus and hospitals. A South Korean train crossed into North Korea for the first time in a decade, packed with engineers on a mission to upgrade the North's dilapidated rail tracks and create a linked cross-border network. Connecting up the railway systems was one of the agreements made earlier this year in a key meeting between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the South President Moon Jae-in. It marked the first time in a decade that a train from the south entered North Korea. TV footage showed a red, white, and blue train displaying a banner reading, "Iron Horse is now running toward the era of peace and prosperity." Pull away from the South's Dorsan station, the nearest terminal from the western part of the inter-Korean border.
분단의 상징이었던 철도를 연결해서 남북 공동 번영의 시작을 알리는 신호탄이 되고 섬처럼 갇혀있던 한반도의 경제 영토를 유라시아 대륙으로 확장하는 촉매자가 될 것입니다.
The six-carriage train is transporting 28 South Koreans, including railway engineers and other personnel, and carrying 55 tons of fuel and an electricity generator. There is a passenger coach, a sleeping coach, an office coach, and a wagon loaded with water for showers and laundry. When it arrives at Panmun Station, the first North Korean terminal across the border, the six carriages will be linked up to a North Korean train, and the South Korean locomotive will return home. The South Koreans and their counterparts will live in the train, inspecting two railway lines for a total of 18 days, one linking the north-southernmost Quezon City to Sinuiju City near the Chinese border, and the other connecting Mount Kugmangang near the inter-Korean border to Tumen River bordering Russia in the east. They will travel some 2,600 kilometers on railway tracks together, the Transport Ministry said. Before the division of the Korean Peninsula in 1948, there were two railway lines linking the north to the south, one in the west and the other in the east. As a gesture towards reconciliation, the two Koreas reconnected the Western Line in 2007, and limited numbers of freight trains transported materials and goods to and from the Seoul-invested Kaesong Industrial Zone in the north for about a year. But the line has since then been put out of service due to heightened tensions over the North's nuclear development program. The current railway project has also faced delays over concerns it could violate UN sanctions imposed on the North over its nuclear and missile programs. But the UN Security Council granted an exemption for the joint study last week, although it is unclear whether others will be given as the project progresses. The South's Unification Ministry has earmarked some 63.4 billion won for next year on the assumption that it will take 5 years to repair and improve the two railway routes in the north. Thousands of Australian students skipped school to join nationwide protests demanding government action on climate change. The demonstrations were held as more than 100 bushfires blazed in scorching temperatures in the northeast, and a day after Indian mining firm Adani vowed to go ahead with a massive and controversial coal mine. Primary and secondary students rallied in state capitals and rural areas across the country in defiance of Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who earlier said kids should stay in the classroom.
Our Prime Minister thinks we should be in school right now, and maybe we should be. But how can we just sit by and not do anything to protect the future of this planet?
Morrison told Parliament earlier in the week that the government was committed to tackling climate change, but I'll tell you what we are also committed to: kids should go to school. Students creatively rebuked the Prime Minister, who goes by the name ScoMo, with humorous banners saying, "I hate ScoMo more than I hate school." They also carried placards calling for the government to block the Adani mine project, a day after the Indian mining firm had announced it would go ahead with a scaled-back version of the coal mine in northern Queensland.
If we don't stop temperatures going over 2 degrees, we won't have the Great Barrier Reef. Antarctica will melt, and there will be no such thing as polar bears. My life will be so much more complicated than my parents' life because of one simple thing: climate change.
The protests capped off a week of brutal weather in Australia. More than 100 fires continued to blaze across Queensland state amid an unprecedented scorching heat wave. The crisis forced hundreds to flee their homes at its peak. On the same day, in the neighboring state of New South Wales, Sydney was hit by severe thunderstorms and heavy rainfall, forcing the cancellation of flights, closure of rail lines, and leaving motorists stranded on flooded roads. Scientists this week also launched the largest ever attempt to regenerate the endangered Great Barrier Reef, where large swaths of coral on the 2,300-kilometer reef have been killed by rising sea temperatures linked to climate change. Up next, US, Mexico, Canada sign new USMCA trade deal. Syrian refugees stranded at Malaysian airport lands in Canada. Facebook knew about Russian activity in 2014. These and more when Eagle News Canada returns. We will be right back. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News Canada. The leaders of the United States, Mexico, and Canada on Friday signed a new trade deal. This new deal replaced the old NAFTA in a triumph for President Donald Trump, who insisted on what he said were better conditions for U.S. workers.
I have to say it's been so well reviewed, I don't expect to have very much of a problem. To ensure the complete implementation of our agreement.
Le nouvel accord de libre-échange nord-américain maintient la stabilité et la croissance pour l'économie canadienne. Il protège des millions d'emplois à travers le pays, renforce la classe moyenne et crée de nouvelles opportunités pour nos entreprises.
El tratado que hoy suscribimos es la expresión de la voluntad compartida por nuestras tres naciones de trabajar unidas por el bienestar y la prosperidad de cada una de nuestras sociedades.
A Syrian refugee who spent months in limbo in a budget terminal at a Malaysian airport has arrived in Vancouver after he was granted permanent residency in Canada. Hassan Al-Qantar's plight became widely known after he shared posts on social media that showed him surviving on donated airline meals, washing and giving himself a haircut in the toilets at Kuala Lumpur International Airport's Terminal 2. He had been stuck since March, blocked from entering Malaysia because of visa issues and barred from traveling to other countries, and was detained last month by immigration officials. After Qantar's arrest, Malaysian officials had said they were going to work with Syrian authorities to deport him back to his war-torn homeland. But Qantar's lawyer Andrew Brewer said they brought the Syrian back to the Kuala Lumpur airport on Monday before he was put on a Vancouver-bound flight. Brewer said his client was recognized by Canada as a refugee and was granted permanent residency under the country's refugee sponsorship program. He said that they were, of course, very pleased that Malaysia appeared to agree and abide by international law. Malaysia's immigration office said in a statement it had held talks on basis of concern and humanity with the embassy of the country that agreed to receive his relocation without naming Canada. In the video on his Twitter account, Qantar said he was in transit in Taiwan and that he would be reaching his final destination the following day. In Vancouver, he was greeted by Laurie Cooper, who, with the help of a group of residents in the ski resort of Whistler and British Columbia Muslim Association, brought him to Canada and raised almost 15,000 Canadian dollars for his fresh start.
We'll try to be a valid member of this community, and I will always respect their methods, their ways of lives. I will educate myself about their history and about traditions as well, and I will fit as soon as I can in this lovely community. And one day when I have children, I will absolutely tell them that not to forget that the Canadian people helped me and changed my life and theirs as well.
Qantar is not the only asylum seeker who has been left in limbo at an airport for a long period of time. In 2015, an Iraqi family spent more than 2 months in an empty smoking cubicle in a Moscow airport, relying on passengers to bring them food and water. Qantar's case also recalls the 2004 film The Terminal, in which Tom Hanks plays a man who finds himself stuck in a New York airport after his government collapses, rendering his papers useless. Millions of Syrians have fled a devastating 7-year civil war that has left more than 350,000 people dead. A British MP claimed Facebook knew about potentially malicious Russian activity in 2014, long before such activity becomes public during a parliamentary hearing where international lawmakers grilled the company. Damian Collins, head of parliamentary inquiry into fake news and disinformation, quoted from the internal Facebook email seized from U.S. software company 643 under a rarely used parliamentary enforcement procedure.
And I think the fact that this meeting is taking place with representatives from right across the globe just shows just how seriously we take these issues, as do our colleagues in other parliaments.
So our intent is to be there, to answer the questions that you have for us. And for some appearances, Mr. Zuckerberg has made himself available, but not for every appearance, and apologies for that.
Collins quoted from one of the emails, which are part of a U.S. lawsuit, alleging that a Facebook engineer had notified the company in October 2014 that Russian IP addresses were accessing 3 billion data points a day on the network.
Because if Russian IP addresses were pulling down a huge amount of data from the platform, what was that reported, or was that just kept, as so often seems to be the case, just kept within the family and not talked about?
On the specific question of whether or not we believe, based on our subsequent investigations, that there was activity by Russians at that time, I will come back to you.
Facebook has stumbled from one mess to another this year as it grapples with continuing fallout from Russia's use of the platform to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which user data was harnessed in a bid to help candidate Donald Trump, and a huge security breach involving millions of accounts. In an investigative piece published by the New York Times, said Facebook misled the public about what it knew about Russia's election, meddling, and used a PR firm to spread negative stories about other Silicon Valley companies and thus deflect anger away from itself. Allen was also forced to defend Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg, who has refused to appear before the British parliamentary inquiry despite repeated requests to do so. British MPs joined together with fellow lawmakers from the parliaments of Argentina, Brazil, Canada, France, Ireland, Latvia, and Singapore in an unusual move aimed at emphasizing international solidarity on the issue.
We've never seen anything quite like Facebook, where while we were playing on our phones and apps, our democratic institutions, our form of civil conversation, seem to have been upended by frat boy billionaires from California. So Mr. Zuckerberg's decision not to appear here at Westminster, to me, speaks volumes. Don't you see that by using the same tactics of misinformation, rather than being accountable, that you've lost public trust and cannot be trusted to police yourselves?
I'm not going to disagree with you that we've damaged public trust through some of the actions we've taken. Again, just for the record, on the issue of the hiring of this outside firm, Mr. Zuckerberg himself said that was not what he expected of us. He was not personally responsible for the hiring.
Coming up, EBC's Arnie Aquino takes us to the Vancouver Fashion Week. Eagle News Canada will return shortly. This is Eagle News Canada. I'm Lou Aquino. EBC's Arnie Aquino takes us to the ultimate fashion experience at Vancouver Fashion Week. Arnie?
Back for its 32nd season, the Vancouver Fashion Week has a lineup of designers that will surely wow its audience. Staying true to the city's reputation, Vancouver Fashion Week is celebrating multiculturalism and up-and-coming designers. Vancouver Fashion Week founder Jamal Abdurrahman shares why he founded the Fashion Week and his hopes for new designers.
I was organizing shows back before I started, and every show had to be, the next show has to be bigger than the one before. So the next day was Fashion Week, and I was in Paris Fashion Week in 1999, and then I came back and I founded Vancouver. We'll be fortunate to showcase them in front of a wide audience of media and buyers and stylists and editors from all over the world.
Models and designers also share their views.
Well, to be honest, this is my first taste at like a proper fashion week. I've done one show before, so I'm just really excited about it. A bit nervous, but it's like such a good opportunity to get exposure, to meet loads of other designers, loads of influencers, loads of, you know, a mix of everybody. So yeah, it's a really great opportunity and I'm so happy to be here, yeah.
So a lot of people who come and see fashion things in Vancouver are going to be like amazed by all the diversity of like designers and influences from around the world. So I think it's a really good place for people starting out.
The way it's going so far, like I love the way they have like different shape of models. It don't matter if you're big or too small, but I just love it. Yeah.
Reporting from the Vancouver Art Gallery here in Vancouver, I am Arnie Aquino, 1 with 25.
Thanks, Arnie. That is this week's Eagle News Canada. Join us next week for stories that matter to you. Visit our website at Eaglenews.PH and EagleNewsLive.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/EagleNewsPH. Thank you for watching. I am Lou Aquino. I am 1 with 25.